Hi, thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Sales Fusion dialogues. We're going to be explaining what a dialogue is, how it works, what are some of the advantages, and then of course building out a dialogue. Where I'd like to start today is I'd like to start showing you two examples of what a dialogue is. And in our terminology, a dialogue is a form, anywhere that you are capturing information. It can be a lot of information or it can be just a little bit of information. You can see on my screen here that I have a webinar form. Somebody can register for a webinar, they can provide their information, and they can register and go to a confirmation page. I have another example over here. This was a new customer form where they can enter it out and they can send a welcome email. Dialogues can be, again, registration forms. They can be surveys. They can be sign up for our newsletter. They can be any type of information where you're capturing data. What you can do with the form is they are commonly put into a dialogue, into an email campaign as a call to action. So you have your email campaign, there's a call to action in the middle, they click on it, it goes to a dialogue, they submit, and it ties to a trigger. That is a full circle, very easy full circle to create inside of our system. Now as you can see, the dialogues can look and feel any way that you like. This is our generic setup. You can see we have our logo at the top, we have some data here, and we have our questions in this gray box. This is a completely different setup in the fact that they have it looking just like their main website. Depending on your skill set with HTML really depends on what you can do with the dialogue skins. There are two parts to a dialogue that we're going to be discussing, and one part is the questions, and the second part is what I'm referring to as the skin. The skin is the look and the feel that's going to go all around the questions. So here are my questions, and the button is part of the questions, and then everything else around it, this logo, the background, the logo up here, the navigation panes, that is all part of the skin. They are created separately, and then we marry the two together to produce this page. We're going to look inside the Sales Fusion system, and clicking on the Dialogues tab, I can come over here to select, and this is where I'll be able to see existing dialogues as well as create a new dialogue. For existing dialogues, you have the ability to edit them, copy the entire dialogue, and it will make an exact replica. You can delete it, of course, and then you can also create a new one. And we're going to go ahead and create a new one. First thing you want to do is you want to give it a name. You always want to make sure your dialogue names are unique so that you are able to find them as you get more and more dialogues inside of the system. I like using dates, so as a best practice, I tend to use the date. And I'm going to put in training. Dialogue type. Most of these are for organization. You have a dialogue, it could be a landing page, it could be a redirect form, registration form, survey. It's just a way to identify what type of dialogue it is. There are a couple that will actually change the layout of the dialogue. That is a redirect form, and that is a phone survey. These are not talked about on today's call, but they are rather offered in an advanced dialogue class. If you are interested in either one of these, please look for that advanced class either on the recorded version of the Learning Management, or you can watch for the live version to come out. For our purposes, I'm going to choose a registration form, and then you can either make the dialogue active or inactive. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine active because unless I give somebody the URL to the dialogue or I link it somewhere, nobody's going to have access to it. You can also tell the system that at a certain time and date you want it to expire. I can say on, well, that's jumping to September. Let's go back. We'll say on April 2nd, we want it to expire at 6 a.m. This just saves me from having to jump in here and manually change it. It will just automatically shut off, and the people will then see an inactive notice if they try to activate it. Description. You can copy the description here and paste it right here. However, if you plan on using your dialogue in social media, meaning Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Foursquare, any of those items, the description will appear when you add it to your social media. So in this case, rather than copying and pasting, I would probably do something like, this is a test dialogue, please disregard. You might want to put in, this is a registration form for our webinar, upcoming webinar in April. or, here's a customer service for 2011. Quick Start. These are made to allow you to quickly jump in and create a dialogue. We love shortcuts. We love giving you the ability to quickly do things, and this is one of those areas that can definitely help you do that. The Create Registration Form with Fields. What this will do is it will create 2 generic pages, and upon submission of page 1, the system knows that it's going to go to page 2. With fields means that it's already going to populate with some existing fields or questions. First name, last name, email, company, the basic information. Create a 2-page dialog will tell the system to create 2 generic pages, and it will already have the logic built in that upon submission of page 1, it's going to go to page 2. But it doesn't have any questions already created for it. That's why it doesn't have the with fields. Create a 1-page dialog tells the system that you are going to have a 1 generic page, and upon submission of that page, it's going to be going to a URL that you will need to then specify. And a classic dialog will simply tell the system to create 1 generic page, but it will have no logic built in whatsoever. The classic dialog is commonly used when you are doing an advanced dialog. So if you're doing some advanced routing, such as if, depending on how somebody answers the question on page 1, they either go to page 3 or page 4, or maybe page 2. That would be considered a classic dialog. For our purposes, we're going to be creating a 2-page dialog, so that's what I'm going to choose. And then I'm going to come up here in the upper right-hand corner and click on Create. I will then be taken into the dialog properties where I will begin to have a plethora of options. You may not use all of these options for every single dialog. You may not use them for any of your dialogs, but it's good to know what they actually do. For the on-submit subject, you do have the ability, and we'll talk about the subscriptions in just a little bit, to say on submit, meaning as soon as somebody completes this dialog, I want an on submit alert to go out. By default, the subject line of that alert will say dialog completed, and then it will have your dialog name. If you are very unique with how you do your dialog names, it may not make sense to an outside person, such as a sales rep. So in that case, you might want to say something like contact us, form completed. Might make more sense for them. You can also use the merge fields. You can say something like ++, email, ++ if you are capturing the email. If I filled it out, it would say jamie.whited@salesfusion.com, contact us, form completed. So definitely allows you to have some dynamic content in there. Short URL, we're going to talk about that when we get to the itty bitty. You can see it brought over our dialog type. It's active, our folder, and our start form. Up here in the right-hand corner, we have our Visual Dialog Designer. This is a very cool feature, works very much like Visio. If you are a visual person and you work better with dragging and dropping and seeing it formed in front of you, you will really enjoy using the Visual Dialog Designer. I will not be showing it on today's call. However, there is a video about the designer on the Learning Management Center under Dialogues. Please note that if you check this box, you cannot go back from it. So that's why I'm not going to go in there. I want to build it this way. Sync with external CRM. By default, this is checked, and it tells the system that if you are auto-populating, meaning as soon as somebody completes your form, and the information will go straight into the Sales Fusion system, and then we will turn around and push it straight into your external CRM. Your Microsoft, SalesLogic, Sage, any of those. If this box is unchecked, it simply tells the system to only auto-populate inside the Sales Fusion system, but don't populate the external CRM. The Share on Social is a feature that is currently in development. It's going to be used in conjunction with the Facebook pages. Currently, it does not do anything at this time. You see it brought over our Expire dialog, and then we also have another option to have max number of seats. This is especially important if you're doing something like a lunch and learn, or you're limiting how many people can actually attend a training session. I could put in the number 20 here, and basically what this is telling the system that as soon as 20 people register for my dialogue, it will automatically become inactive. If you don't care about how many people attend, let's say you're doing a webinar and you can have up to 500, simply leave it as 0. Always hit Save and Stay before moving on. That allows you to save all the information that you've just configured here in case you accidentally close out your browser window or you accidentally navigate to a different screen. Now we're going to come down here and we're going to look at some of our sub-tabs. You can see it says Dialog Saved. And you see our two generic pages that were created because we chose the Create Two-Page Quick Start. We're going to open up page 1, and we're going to manipulate the properties that are part of page 1. The first thing that you always want to change is going to be the page title. The page title should always be something unique and some way for you to identify it if you want to run a custom report. You're going to be seeing it on your web forensics. You're going to see it inside the contact lead record. So it is very important what you name this. Note that it is also rendered inside of the person's browser. So you can see up here, somebody didn't change page 1. For our purposes, I'm going to go ahead and put in 030212, and we'll say training. The submit button is just what text will appear on the button that the person will click. You can do submit, register, click here to go to the next page. One of our examples had send welcome email. This button will grow as you type. So if you want to say go to page 2 out of 5, which is 5 out of 10, by all means put that in there and it will grow. I'm going to leave it as submit. One other item to note is that you can also use an image. Let's say that you Google the word arrow and you find a red arrow that you want people to click on to know to go to the next page. You would simply upload that image to the Dialog Media Manager. Important to note that we have two media managers. We have a Marketing Media Manager and we have a Dialog Media Manager. These do not talk to one another. So if you have an image inside Marketing Media, it will not be available inside the Dialog Media, and vice versa. So I would upload my image to the Media Manager inside of the Images folder, and then I would simply reference the name of my file. So if my file was named arrow.jpg, that's exactly what I would put in here. And the system's going to reference that Media Manager in the Images folder and find this image. I don't have a file name that, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave mine as submit. The description here does not render to anybody or on anything, including social websites. So I usually take the page title and copy and paste. Of course, you can put anything you want in there. The next area we're going to talk about is the merge field. And this is actually going to be talked about inside the questions because it's a little bit more applicable there. So we'll come back to that. Cookie user. When the person submits their information, do you want them to be cookied with a SalesFusion cookie? I would say 99.99% the answer would be yes. Place and trigger email. When the person completes this page, do you want them to receive a trigger email? The placement of the trigger email is very important. You should always place the trigger email on the last page that you are asking questions. What I mean by that is if I have a two-page dialogue, and my first page I'm asking all the questions, and my second page is just the thank you page, I would tie in my trigger here on the first page. If I have let's say I have a 5-page dialogue, and I'm asking questions on page 1, 2, 3, 4, and then page 5 is a thank you page, I would put my trigger on page 4. The reason the placement is important because you don't want the person to receive a trigger before they're supposed to. If in my 5-page dialogue I set it on page 2, that means the person only has to complete up until page 2 before they receive the trigger. So technically, they're not completing it. Map the CRM records should always be yes. You should always be mapping at least the email address back. It can either be a hidden field or it can be an actual field where the person is typing in. But regardless, that email address should always be coming back to the system. So map the CRM, always yes. Final page. Is this the final page that the person is actually going to be touching? Not the final page with questions, but just the final page. In our example, the answer is no. We're going to be having them go to a thank you page, and then that is going to be their final page. When you do set final page to yes, which we're going to do on our second page, you would then have the option to auto-populate the CRM. Do you want, as soon as the person completes the form, for their information to go straight into the Sales Fusion system? Some people say yes, some people say no. If you want to weed out the Oscar the Grouches and Big Birds and Elmo monsters, you can do that by choosing not to auto-populate. However, please note it is a manual process. You will need to come in here, you will need to manually approve what records are to be pushed in, and then tell the system to push them. Down here, we have an option called CAPTCHA or security text, where you can require the person to enter security text before they submit the form. As a best practice, most people do not use these too often or too much, in the fact that they have a higher abandon rate when they do get used. However, if you do want to use it, you simply check this box here. You can also change the text that renders to the right of the box. If you don't like what this says, change it and say enter text. You can also tell the system to have a refresh image link. If you don't want to say generate new image, you can change it to something else and say new image instead. Once you're done with this page, you want to scroll up and you want to hit save. It's going to take just a second, but you'll see that it's saved right here in red. We're now going to move on to our questions. We have many ways to create questions. If you are new to Sales Fusion, you have a brand new account, it's going to take you a minute to get a dialog created, to get the questions together, because you don't have anything to copy from or pull from. I'm going to show you how to copy. I'm going to show you how to create from new. Down here, we obviously have the ability to copy an existing page. So I can find an existing dialog and say copy all of the questions from that particular page. I can also tell the system, you know what, I don't need all the questions, I just need one question from that page, and copy the question. I can also import the question template, and the question template will have the standard information, first name, last name, email, etc. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new field. So I'm going to select new field here. The first thing that you see here is this merge tag, and I told you we would talk about that in just a moment when we got to the questions. What this merge tag does is, let's say on the thank you page, you want to say, thank you so much for registering, and email confirmation has been sent to jamie.whited@salesfusion.com. It's common to think that you could use that ++ email ++ tag that looks like this. This is what you would use normally inside of an email campaign. However, you can't really do that with a dialog, because what if their information does not exist? We don't have time to get that information from the form, push it into the CRM, turn around, extract it out, place it on the thank you page by the time they get to the thank you page. Happens pretty fast, but it doesn't happen that fast. So instead, what you can do is you can reference the merge field. Each question has its own unique merge field. So if I were creating my scan, I would do something like, thank you for registering. An email has been sent to, and put that, whoops, I didn't copy it. Let me copy that real quick. There we go. So when the person gets to this page, this will dynamically change to whatever they put in the value for that question. So if I put in, my email is jamie@salesfusion.com, it will say an email has been sent to jamie@salesfusion.com. If I put in, it's dora@explorer.com, it will say an email has been sent to dora@explorer.com. Will dynamically change again with whatever I put in for that value. Down here is the field name, and the field name is how is it going to render on the reports. Most of the time, it's going to be the same exact as the question. Email, email. You can maybe want to do business email for the question. The purpose we have for having a field name is because there may be a long question that you need to ask. For example, you need to maybe want to say, please explain to us how close you are to buying a solution similar to ours, and please tell us how much money you have to spend. It's a very long question, and that's not what you'd probably want to see on your report. You might want to see on your report something like, how soon and how much, or anything that you want it to be. The question is how it's going to render to the end user. So if I want to have email on my report, but I want to have business email, on the question, this is what they're going to see. I can also change the styling here. I can make it blue, I can make it bold, I can underline it, I can make it big. If I know HTML, I can switch over here and I can start changing things in here as well for inline styling. Down here, we have a lot of different field types, and instead of running through each and every one of them and describing them, I'm actually going to show you what they look like. So I'm going to hop over here and we're going to run through them. The first type is a checkbox, and you can see this is just a single checkbox that you can either check or uncheck. These are commonly used with questions like, would you like to receive our newsletter? Either check or uncheck. Have you read our terms and policies? Check or uncheck. That's what that would be for. Checkbox list is obviously where you have multiple checkboxes. The checkbox list is the only field where you are able to have more than one option. So if your question includes check all that apply, you should be using a checkbox list. A date is obviously an edit text field. I can manually type something in here, or I can use my little calendar helper to help me. Dropdown is a drop-down list. Edit text is a free form where I can type in anything I want. An email is obviously a free form field, but it also is telling the system that you are required to have an email format, something at something dot something. It does include international email setups, .com.aus, .nls, .sgs, .co.uks. All of those are supported, but it's telling the system I can't just put in jamie.whited. The email field also correlates to the domain exclusion list that you can create, where you can say, I am not going to accept certain domains being entered as a value. Allows you to exclude competitor domains, freeware domains. So again, you want to maximize the valid emails that you're getting. A label, if you can see here, has no input on the end user side. It's simply a way to kind of break out sections. A lot of times people use labels to say this is the address information section. This is the personal information section. This is your company information section. So just kind of a good little placeholder here. Multi-line edit is obviously a bigger edit text box, commonly used for comments, descriptions, that type of information. Password is a password. This is where you can type in information, and as I'm typing, you can see it's changing it into bullet points. Radio button is a radio button. Rating and slider are fantastic for surveys. So if you do a lot of customer surveys, or if you want to send out a survey after an event and say, how was our speaker, how was our atmosphere, how did everything look, then you could go ahead and use the rating. You can change the color of the stars. You can make them half. You can make them whole. You can even change the background. So if you don't like it black, you don't have, or excuse me, white, you don't have to have it white. You can change it to red or blue or green. For the slider, you can also use the sliding tool. The values here can be changed. They can be between 0 and 100. They can be between 50 and 100. They can be between 1 and 5. Completely up to you. And then we have our time field, which again is an edit text, but we also have a little helper here to choose a time. So a lot of options. Really just depends on what you're trying to do. Hopping back over here, since this is an email, we obviously want to choose an email field. The event field is not applicable unless you are using the event management. I don't think anybody on this call is, but if you are using the event management, this will be covered inside event management training. Map to field is very important. This tells the system where is this data going to be mapped to in your CRM. We're using an email field, so obviously we want to have it mapped to our field email. If you are using an external CRM, it is important that you map to fields that exist inside of your CRM. The only exception, and this is for Microsoft users only, is Microsoft uses the email address one field. Never under any circumstances will you ever map to that field. Our system lives, runs, and breathes off of our email field. On the back end, we push it to the email address field. You also don't even have to map a value back. If I didn't want to, I could say do not map to CRM. This is commonly done if you're just gathering information just for your informational purposes, not to exist on the data. Customer surveys are a good one. I send out a customer survey every year, and I don't really care too much about logging that data back. I basically just want to see it as people are completing it. Let me change this back to email. Overwrite value. By default, if a value exists inside of a record, when they complete a form, if it changes, we will overwrite it with a new value. There may be certain fields, like source, that you do not want to overwrite if a value already exists. And if you don't want to overwrite, you would simply uncheck that box, and if a value exists, it would retain that value rather than overwriting with the new value. Default value is where you can have a default value appear, or you can also utilize this little tag here, plus plus blank plus plus. What this little tag does is if a person is cookied by our system and they access a dialog, we will reference and auto-populate the fields with any information that we have. If you don't want it to auto-populate, then this is when you would use the plus plus blank plus plus. This tells the system, even if we have them cookied, we're not going to pre-populate the information. The next area up here is called display. And I'm not going to get too much into detail here, but this just allows you to customize and do some more advanced items with the design of the field. You can obviously change the display name orientation. You can use CSS, cascading style sheets. You can change the orientation for radio buttons and checklists. Required, width of column, max length. These are all great little items that you can look at and you can work with to make it look the way that you are anticipating it to. I'm going to go ahead and hit save because I'm done with this field. I'm going to do one more because I want to show you a drop-down. So for this one, we're going to do current CRM. I'm just going to copy and paste that right here. And I'm going to do a drop-down box. When you do a drop-down box, a radio button, or a checklist, you're going to see this appear up here. This is where you're going to tell the system what values are these people going to be able to choose from. If you are doing a drop-down and it's a required field, then your first value must be something generic, something like choose one, pick one, select, ... anything. It prevents people from being a little lazy and kind of leaving it on the first value. If you did that and you didn't have a generic one, you'd be surprised at how many people would leave it on Alabama or Abu Dhabi. I'm doing a current CRM one, so I'm going to just enter a couple values here. Always separate with a semicolon. And then I'm going to choose add. Now, I manually type these in, but you can also import from a pick list. You can import the United States and territories, import countries, 1 through 10, and yes and no. Now that I've added, I have 3 columns. I have items. Items is what the end user will see and be able to choose from. The return value is what comes back to the system, and the generic one should always be blank. There should never be a value here for the generic option. We have items and we have return values because occasionally there may be a field where the back end value is different from the front end. An example of that is we have a customer who is a lawyer. They have a law firm, and they were asking a question of, what was your crime? Was it burglary? Was it DUI? Was it arson? Was it murder? What was it? And they were trying to return those exact values into their Microsoft CRM, but it wasn't taking it. Come to find out that the back-end value is actually numerical for them. So DUI equal to 1, arson equal 2, and so on. This just allows you to have a different return value. And then, of course, you can change the order by changing the number and then clicking this little reorder sign. I'm done with this one, so I'm going to select Save. And now we're going to move on to our skin. So I'm going to hop over to the skin, and this is where I would build, again, the look and the feel that goes around the question. Now, you can see that we have these cells and we have this gray background, but if I go to Preview, you can see it's gone. And that's just a gray background so you can see the outline of the pre-built cells. What I can do here is I can build my content from scratch using the design icons. I can import an HTML or an HTML file. If I scroll down to the bottom, I can also import from the skin library if I'm using the skin library. Import from the e-marketing template library. So I can grab any one of these and say import template. I like using these because it allows you to have the same look and feel that you are already using for your email campaigns. A lot of it is, about e-marketing is having a consistent look and a consistent brand, and this allows you to do that. You can also copy from an existing page if you have existing dialogues. You can use the slurp function where you can type in a URL, including the HTTP, and it will go out to that URL and slurp up all of the HTML as well as the JavaScript. Again, the slurp is a little bit of user beware, and that you need to be able to be comfortable hopping into the HTML and removing any illegal script that does not belong. Lastly, you can, of course, import from a hard drive. There's one other aspect that's very important to the skin, and this is the ++ content tag. What this does is this tells the system where are the questions going to be placed. I'm going to hit Save, or I can hit Save and Publish, and Save will allow you to save it. Save and Publish will marry the skin together with the questions. I'm going to hit Save and Publish right now, and let's view the page. It might take just a moment, but when the page renders, you can see my questions are all the way up here. Maybe that's not where I want the questions. So I would come in here and I would move this little ++ content tag and say, you know what, I'm going to have it come right there. I'll go ahead and just put my name in. And then save and publish. Anytime you make any type of change, you have to save and publish. I saved and published, and now let's view the page. You can now see that my questions are no longer at the top, but they're now where I place that content tag. Very important to note that whether you are asking questions or not, like on a thank you page, you're not going to have any questions. This content tag must remain. If you try to take it out and save and publish, you're going to get an error up here in red saying you must have a content tag. Our next area over here is the next page logic, and this is telling the system where the person is going to be redirected to upon submission. Because we did a create to page dialog, it automatically built in the logic to go to page 2 upon submission of page 1. However, I can change this. I can instead do what I call advanced routing logic, where I'm sending someone somewhere based on how they answer a question. For this one, I'm going to say if they choose Microsoft, then I have to add my conditions. What has to be met? I'm going to choose my page that the questions are on. My fields, I'm going to use CRM. Decision operator, you can use equals, does not equal, contains, etc. And then it'll show you some possible values. So I'm going to say Microsoft. Save. So if somebody completes this form and the value for this question equals Microsoft, I'm going to have them go to the thank you page. But then I'm going to have them receive a Microsoft-specific email. And then maybe Michael is the owner of all of my Microsoft leads. So any new leads coming in that meet this condition will be assigned to Michael. Lots of advanced stuff that you can do here. I'm going to save and close. I'm going to do another one. We'll call this one if Salesforce.com. Again, I have to add my condition. So I'm going to say for this page, for this field, if it equals Salesforce.com, what's going to happen? Now I can very well send them to the thank you page. I can have them get entered into a different trigger email and assigned to a different owner. For our testing purposes, I'm going to have them go to a URL so we can see the difference. So I'm going to have them go to my home page. I can then say add to a Salesforce.com specific email. And then I can say Uma is the owner of all of my records coming in that are Salesforce.com. And save and close. I can continue to do this for all of my possible options or values. However, let's say that only Microsoft and Salesforce.com are important to me. Then I would do just one more logic, and that would be considered what I call a catch-all. This one I would have no conditions, and I would tell the system where to go. And I'm going to just go ahead and put in, we'll put in Twitter.com. Again, I can have them get enrolled into a totally different email, be assigned to a totally different person, and save and close. The order here is very important. The way the system is going to work is it's going to work kind of in a waterfall effect. If Michael comes to my dialog and he completes it, the system is first going to look and see if his value for current CRM equals Microsoft. If it does, then he's going to go to this form, and receive that email. If it does not, it's going to come down to the second condition and say, well, does it equal Salesforce.com? If it does, then he will go to the URL and receive the Salesforce.com specific trigger. If not, then it's going to look at the third one. And this one had no conditions, so everything else will fall into this particular catch-all. If I had this catch-all as number 1, everything would meet that criteria and nothing would ever go into any of these. We're technically done with this page, so I'm going to go ahead and return to the dialog. And now I'm going to customize my thank you page, which we can do a lot faster. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to, again, make sure I have a unique page title. Submit button doesn't matter unless you're asking a question. Map to CRM, again, should always be yes. Final page, yes. Auto-populate, I'm going to say yes. And then I'm going to save. You can see that it's saved again by looking down here on the left. We can skip over the questions because this is just going to be our thank you page, so there's no questions. And I'm just going to type in, for time's sake, thank you, and save and publish. That's it. We're done with our second page. I'm going to return back out to the dialog, and now it's time to test it. The easiest way to test it would be to click here, and it opens up in a new browser. I can now enter my information. Let's choose Microsoft, and I should be taken to the thank you page. And I am. So I know that that logic is working. When you have a dialog with advanced logic, you need to make sure you test every possible scenario and make sure that it is working as expected. My next one was Salesforce.com. This should take me to the Sales Fusion website, which it did. So that one is working properly. And of course, I'm going to test it one more time to make sure that if I choose any other value, that it should take me to the Twitter page. And it did. So my logic is working exactly as expected. Let's go ahead and talk about some of these other subtabs down here. The first one is called lead routing. One of the great advantages of using the Sales Fusion dialogs is that you can tell the system to assign owners of new leads in a very particular manner. You can do it based on primary contact. You can use geos. You can use them for country, state, or postal code. So what is a geo? A geo is a geography grouping that you can create under the Administration tab under 360 Admin. Basically, what it allows you to do is it allows you to define, you're in your own definition of what, let's say, Southeast comprises of. I can say to me, the Southeast, I would think of Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. Well, Jason over here might say, you know what? I think the Southeast is Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina. We're allowed to have different opinions. When you use the geos, that's one of the benefits of the geos, is because you can define what it means to you. You can assign new records based on country, state, or postal code because geos can be assigned to users. I can say Jason is the owner of the Southeast, Jamie is the owner of the Midwest, Rick is the owner of the West Coast, and as these new leads are coming in, if you're capturing contact, state, or postal code, we can reference those geos and be able to assign it to the appropriate person. We also have a geos waterfall. These are only looking at country. This is only looking at state. This is only looking at postal code. The geo waterfall actually looks at all three of them. It starts with the most granular, which is the postal codes. And if you are capturing postal code and you have a postal code geo, we will assign the owner. If you're not doing either one of those, then it next looks at states. Then it next looks at countries. So it's kind of a waterfall effect. You also have the ability to do a round robin. We work with a lot of customers who don't have large sales teams. They may only have 5 sales reps. And they can say, with these sales reps, I want the owners to go between these people and move them over. So the first new lead would be assigned to Salesforce. Second would go to Uma. Third would go to Amal. Fourth would go to Sam. Then it would start back up here. Very easy to do. You can also have the ability to tell the system to send the alert only to the owner of the record. If Susie is the owner of my record and I complete the form, guess what? Susie gets an on-submit alert saying I completed it. If Bob is the owner of Johnny's record, then Bob would be the one to receive the on-submit alert. If I scroll back up, we also have a testing tab. Now, I was clicking to test by clicking on this link, but you can also come right here and click here to test. You can also grab the URL here, and you can put it right in and be able to test it. One of the big things that you need to be aware of, and this is a very, very common mistake that people make, is when somebody accesses a dialog, or when you take and you paste that into a browser, we dynamically change the URL to capture the unique session. And if you then grab that URL that it renders and try to use that or hyperlink to it, it's going to be wrong. You will get a user timed out error. What I mean by that is if you look up here, it's host.messageapp.af2 link ID, etc., link ID. As soon as I hit enter, it changes. It's still host.messageapp.com, but now it's extranet 955 forms, etc. Never, ever, ever grab this URL from the browser and you hyperlink it, use it on your website, anywhere, because it will give you a timed out error. Over here, we have reports. This will give you some canned reports that we have. By far, one of my favorite is the individual form results. This is where you can see who has completed your form. You can also uncheck that, refresh, and see who has started it but did not complete it. You can see all the touches that I have where I didn't fill out any information. We also have a visual graph here where you can look at it from this area. Subscriptions are where you can subscribe somebody to receive alerts for this particular dialog. So what I can do is I can select New. I can find my user. I can choose the format I want them to receive it in, and I can choose On Submit, which means the moment it gets completed. I can choose Daily, which will show new registrants, or new completes, rather, for the past 24 hours. Or I can choose a weekly report, which will be a cumulative report. With the weekly report, I can also choose the day of the week that I want to receive it on. And then, of course, I can choose to set it to expire or not. We also have a flow diagram, which is just a visual tool. That's all it is. If you're a visual person and you like seeing this in a tree view, you can come in here and see how the logic is connected, see what the conditions are, and see how it works. The itty-bitty is commonly used in social media. Basically, this is a really long, ugly URL. It's long, and it doesn't work very well if I were to take this and post it on my Twitter. It works, but it takes up about 3/4 of my allotted characters that I can use for Twitter. So instead, what I can do is I can come over here. I can put in a prefix of 5 to 10 characters. I'm going to use today's date. But of course, you would use something like webinar or, dialogue 123, anything you want. And then click on Generate Itty Bitty URL. And it takes this big, long URL, and it makes this cute little itty bitty URL. Much smaller, much cleaner, Goes much nicer with social media sites. Once that's generated, I can then hop down over to social networking and activate it. I can choose if I want to use my big long URL, if I want to choose my itty bitty, or we even have the option to use an itty.vc. I can then put in a subject line, and then I say generate social links. These become active, and I can now access my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Twitter, and post right to it with no issues. I go to my Facebook. I'd have to write something, and then I'd be done. An active notice allows you just to customize the inactive notice that somebody would see if they accessed your dialogue after you had turned it off. The purpose of this, I can do practical application, is we have a customer who does a lot of training sessions. And when she is using the max seats, and let's say it's 20, when this dialogue has reached its max, she then says, this class is full. Please contact me for support at etc. It just allows you to customize what the person sees. Sharing image is part of the Facebook application publishing that will be coming out in the next few months, and we'll keep you updated on that. And lastly, we have our QR image. This is definitely one of the bigger things nowadays, is where you can link a QR code to your dialogue. All you have to do is click on Generate QR Code, and then you save it, and you can add it to your email campaign as an image. You can add it to, we've had people add it to direct mail pieces. We've had people add it to trade show tchotchkes. Lots and lots of stuff that you can do with these. Okay, so that is really in-depth how to build a dialogue. Now, as you get comfortable with the system, it's very easy to use. You can also use our dialogue wizard, which is a quick 5-step. Here's how you created a dialogue. Really quick and good to use. I prefer to show people this way simply so you get to see all the great benefits and all the things that you can do with it more in depth, and then I show you the quick start. As always, under the toolbox, we have our Learning Management Center, where you can access the recorded videos, you can access manuals, and you can access best practices and such. And then we also have our online help. Our online help, if you have not been here, is a great aspect. You can come in here and you can see we have a quick start for dialogues. How do you create a dialogue? Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. Very easy to work with. You can also come down here and you can do a search. If you can't remember what a merge tag does, type in merge tag. Can't remember how to create a question? Type in creating questions. There you go. Automatically populates everywhere it brings it up. I thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your client service rep, or you can email support@salesfusion.com. Thank you and have a great day.